As we celebrate the man who waited decades to be a monarch, spare a thought for his grandson, 11-year-old Prince George. After 9 years of shaping his early life, Prince George's private nanny was unexpectedly fired, but it's her next move that shocked the palace. Most people don't know her name. That's part of the job. Stay close. Stay out of view. For Prince George, that person was Maria Teresa Turion Baralo. She became his nanny in 2014 when he was just 8 months old. Maria was trained at Norland College. Known for preparing nannies to work in high-profile households, she was chosen not just for her skill, but for her ability to stay private. At events, she wore the brown Norland uniform and kept a low profile. To the public, she was hardly noticed. But to George, she was steady and always there. She understood him in a way few did. From early on, George was reserved. He didn't like sudden changes and preferred clear routines. Maria shaped her care around that. But there's something surprising many didn't know. She had been hired after an exhaustive vetting process. A decision reached by Prince William and Catherine, who were both committed to raising their firstborn with as much normality as a royal upbringing could allow. Maria was not new to childcare, but this role was different. This wasn't just a child. This was the future king. Her days started early, often before the sun rose over the high hedges of the palace grounds. Maria would be in George's nursery, humming softly as she checked the temperature, arranged his tiny clothes, and prepared his bottles. She moved quietly, respectfully, always aware of the invisible line between staff and family. But she didn't see herself as just staff. She saw herself as part of something intimate, a witness to moments few others would ever get to see. George was a happy baby from the beginning. He liked to laugh. His laugh could be heard down the halls and made everyone around him smile. Maria learned how to read his mood. She knew he was about to cry when he scrunched his nose. And she knew he calmed down when he saw animal picture books. She remembered all his small steps, his first babble when he stood in his playpen, and the first time he tried to clap to "If You're Happy and You Know It." She was never meant to take the place of his parents. William and Catherine were always involved, but they had many royal duties, so they couldn't always be home. That's where Maria came in. She was the one who was always there. She sat with George at breakfast. She helped him take his first steps. She stayed up with him when his teeth hurt at night. Maria knew her place. She didn't try to act like a parent or talk about how they raised him. But over time, her bond with George grew. She sang old songs from Spain, ones her own mother had sung, and George would rest on her shoulder, calm and quiet. When George turned 2, the palace brought in a photographer to take his birthday picture. Maria was just out of sight, holding up a soft toy to make him laugh and saying silly words only he understood. But for Maria, the real moment was just before the picture was taken. When George started nursery school, Maria changed her routine again. Each morning, she packed his bag carefully with clean clothes, snacks, and a small toy. She walked him to the car and bent down to say goodbye. "Be kind," she whispered. "And listen well." George paid close attention to everything. He noticed when Maria looked tired. He asked why she always wore the same blue coat. One day, he copied her Spanish accent, not to tease, just to understand. Maria taught him a few words in Spanish, and they kept it as their secret. "Buenos dias, Maria," he'd say, proud and smiling. As time passed, they built deep trust. Maria never had to shout. A quiet word or a look was enough. When George was curious, like asking why people waved at their car, Maria answered simply but gently, "Because they care about your family," she said once. "And seeing you makes them smile." That simple truth stayed with him. To outsiders, the palace could feel like too many rules, too much pressure. But inside the nursery, where routines were quiet and familiar, Maria made something special, a space that felt safe and as normal as life could be for a boy whose face was already printed on plates. She marked his big moments in small, kind ways. On his 5th birthday, after his big party was over, Maria had a surprise waiting in the staff area. She had baked cupcakes and decorated a small table. When George came by later and saw it, his face lit up. "Did you make these?" he asked. "Just for you," she said. "Always. Of course. Not every day was easy. In fact, it might surprise you what his tough days were like." George had tough days just like other kids. He could be stubborn or upset when things didn't go his way, but Maria understood. She didn't stop his feelings. She helped him name them. "Are you frustrated or just tired?" she would ask. "Frustrated," he'd say after a while. "Then let's talk about it," she'd reply. By the time Charlotte was born, Maria had settled into her role in the royal family, even though another nanny was brought in to help. Maria stayed close to George. She still walked with him in the palace gardens, where he picked up leaves and sticks and called them treasures. On rainy days, they played quiet board games. She sat nearby while he worked on puzzles, smiling when he got a piece right. One summer, when George was about 6, the family went on a short trip to Scotland. Maria came along and spent most days outside with George. They skipped stones on the lake and looked for bird nests in the trees. At night, they sat by the fire in the big library, reading stories. George often fell asleep in the middle of a tale, his head resting on her shoulder, his hand holding the edge of her sweater. She had been there for every small hurt and happy moment when George fell and scraped his knee, lost a tooth, blew out birthday candles, or learned a hard lesson. She stayed up with him when he had a fever, wiped his tears, and cheered when he scored his first football goal. Deep down, she knew her job wouldn't last forever. Nannies never do. But she wished for a bit more time. However, she was grateful for the trust of a little boy who was never allowed to be just little for very long, and for the knowledge that, though she may not be in the spotlight, she had shaped a future king's childhood in a way that no camera could ever capture. By the time Prince George turned 7, the nursery looked different. It was no longer full of baby toys and songs. Now it had books, toy planes, and signs of a growing mind. The days when Maria fed him porridge and helped him wear soft shoes were gone. These days, her mornings started with getting his school clothes ready, packing his books, and helping him learn new words before his ride to Thomas's Battersea School. Life inside Kensington Palace had changed. George's school days were now very busy. During the week, he had lessons, sports, piano practice, and sometimes had to appear at public events. Maria was still an important part of your day, but things were not the same as before. She no longer needed to carry him. Now she watched as he ran ahead by himself. George was becoming more grown up. He started packing his own school bag. He asked if he could try tying his ties on his own. But he still came to Maria for small things. He would visit her workroom to show her something he made at school or to ask for help with his shoelace. Maria changed with him, like she always had. She gave him the space he needed but stayed nearby. She now spent more time helping with his daily plans, cooking meals he liked on quiet days, and listening to his thoughts or questions. When George turned 8, he started asking bigger questions, not just the usual why, but questions that showed he was thinking deeply. One night, after he went to a charity event with his mother, he asked Maria, "Do all children have beds?" She gave him a soft but honest answer. "No, not every child has a bed." His silence afterwards said more than any question. The royal family had also gotten bigger. Charlotte had grown into a confident little girl, and Louis, though still very small, was full of energy. The Cambridge home was always busy. Maria still focused mostly on George, but she also helped with the others. Sometimes she read with Charlotte or looked after Louis when another nanny wasn't there. Even so, her connection with George was special. In public, George often stood with his parents. He wore a smart jacket, kept his hands together, and looked serious. But at home, he was still just a boy. He asked questions about his title, why he needed guards, and why strangers always took his pictures. Maria answered in a way he could understand. "People expect a lot from you," she said once, "but that doesn't mean you can't be yourself." She helped him hold on to the parts of himself that had nothing to do with being royal: his love for animals, his interest in drawing, the way he laughed and forgot about everything else while playing board games. There were trips to the countryside, weekends at Amber Hall, and beach days when the schedule allowed. During those times, Maria stayed out of sight when needed, but she was always close. She packed George's bag carefully. She watched from a short distance while he played cricket. She gave small signs when it was time to come in and eat. When George turned 9, people began to see more of his royal role. He went to his first Wimbledon match and met more important people. He stood taller. He spoke more clearly. But to Maria, he was still the same boy, the one who stopped to help a hurt bird or left her little notes at breakfast. Sometimes the note simply said, "Gracias," to thank her for helping with homework. Sometimes things change in quiet ways. One autumn, during a school break, George spent most of the day in the library with his dad, reading about old explorers. Maria had set up craft supplies for them to use together, something they had done for years. But George walked past the table without looking. Her heart sank a little, but she didn't say anything. She packed up the crafts and made tea instead. It wasn't that he didn't care anymore. It just meant he was growing up, and she understood that. By the time George turned 10, he had joined more sports teams with set schedules. He was growing fast, and his thoughts were getting stronger. He really liked football and had started to enjoy learning about history, especially the World Wars. He asked more serious questions now. He compared dates, remembered facts, and even corrected Charlotte when she got something wrong. Maria still helped with the little things, cleaning the mud off his shoes after football, making sure he packed enough snacks for school trips, giving him space when he needed it, but always checking on Stater. That year, George had a school trip where he would sleep away from home for 3 nights. It was the first time since he was very little. Maria helped pack his bag with care, warm clothes, a flashlight, and waterproof boots. Before he left, he gave her a small nod. "I'll be fine," he said. She believed him. When he came back, he seemed taller, or maybe it just felt that way. He walked in with more confidence and talked to his brother and sister like someone a little older. He didn't come to find Maria right away, but a few hours later, he found her in the staff sitting room, quietly reading. "I remembered everything," he said. "Didn't lose a thing." She smiled. "I knew you would." George's time was now mostly filled with things he had to do. Prince William and Princess Catherine tried to protect him from too much stress, but some things couldn't be avoided. A title came with responsibilities. Maria's job had quietly changed. She wasn't planning his days anymore. Instead, she helped from the background. She had become a quiet part of his life, not because she was no longer important, but because what she was there to do had changed. The family had also started to talk about changes for the future. William and Catherine brought in new advisors. George's learning team was getting bigger. Now he was being taught by teachers who knew about history, leadership, and how governments work. This led to something unexpected. One morning, Maria was asked to come to a private meeting. The room was quiet. Catherine sat next to William. They spoke in a kind and respectful way. They thanked her for her years of care, for her hard work, her trust, and the role she played in George's early life. Then they carefully explained that George was now at a stage where he didn't need a nanny in the same way. His new teachers would now help him grow into a young adult. This was part of a plan that had been made ahead of time. Maria sat quietly for a moment. She had always known this day would come. But hearing the words made it feel final in a way she hadn't prepared for. She asked just one question. When do I stop? Catherine looked at her. We thought you should choose. But George already knows. He wants to talk to you. Maria left the room and went upstairs. George was sitting by the window, drawing. He stood up when he saw her. Mom told me, he said softly, I don't want things to change. Maria gave a small smile and shook her head. You're growing up, and it's time. He didn't speak again, but he didn't look away either. She didn't cry, not then. That night, she packed a few things she had in the staff area, some books, a drawing George had made when he was 5 in a frame, a notebook filled with memories from when he was little. The next morning, she walked him to breakfast one last time. He sat next to her. He ate quietly. When he finished, he gave her a small wrapped gift. Inside was a leather notebook. On the first page, in his handwriting, were the words, Thank you for being my first teacher. She left Kensington Palace that afternoon. No interviews. Just a quiet walk down the back steps she had used for almost 10 years. But what she did next was something no one expected. Maria Barallo left Kensington Palace quietly. There was no public statement. The palace helped her move into a small home in West London. Her daily life also changed. No more early starts or pressed uniforms. No more meetings with staff. Her mornings were silent, and she let them stay that way. 2 weeks later, she got a message not from William or Catherine, but through the palace office. It said George had settled into his new routine. His school advisors were now fully in charge. Maria would stay on the books for 6 months in case they needed her. But she had no task for now. She turned down a job offer from another wealthy family. It came through Norland College, where she trained. They had 2 kids and lived in Belgravia. She didn't ask questions. She wasn't ready to start again. 3 months later, she visited a retired nanny in Bath. They talked about what it felt like to leave the children you'd cared for and what came after. Maria didn't say much about George, but she spoke of him kindly. When asked if she missed him, she said, Of course I do. Back in London, she had little contact with the palace. Sometimes letters were forwarded to her, some from children, others from Norland students. She replied to them all clearly and kindly. Surprisingly, in the 5th month, she got a letter from the palace listing items she'd left: a cardigan, a notebook, and a child's drawing of a bomb. Clearly George's. They were sent to her, no note included. She placed the drawing in a drawer. At 6 months, her role officially ended. The Duke and Duchess sent a thank you note, hand-delivered. She read it once, then placed it with the drawing, but it didn't stop there. 8 months in, she got a call from the palace. George was preparing for a big public trip. They asked if she could help for a week. She said yes. She returned through the staff entrance. George greeted her briefly. Taller now. They went over his routines and travel needs. She stayed professional and quiet. Before she left, he gave her a folded paper. She opened it on the train. It was a drawing. Another dog with the name Marta. She didn't return again. Life moved on. George appeared more in public, standing tall, speaking less like a child. Maria watched from afar. Quietly, she later helped start a support program for retired nannies. You don't raise children to keep them close. You raise them to walk away and to walk wisely. Did the royal family quietly regret letting her go, Or do you think they should have kept Maria even if George had outgrown the need for a nanny? Share your opinions with us in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen, and you will enjoy it.